all work, all tests. The only thing that will be after that is your test that's on Monday. And that test will be due that Monday. If I were you, I would take it before then. So the last test you have is your science test number 8, and it's Monday. It's due Monday. It's the only thing that I've assigned online that's due the same day. You can do it today and turn it in tonight, which is what I would advise. But if you want to do it tomorrow or Sunday, you can do that. Or you want to do it Monday, you can do that. But if you do it Monday and turn it in on Tuesday, anything after Monday, I cannot guarantee that it will be graded in time. Your parents are coming to pick up your report cards and drop off your books on the 5th. That's Friday. Report cards are due from the teachers on Wednesday. So that's all the 3rd graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th, both subjects. So if I get the test from Lucy on Tuesday night and I don't see it until Wednesday, I cannot guarantee that I'll be able to grade it, enter it into the iGrade Plus and put it into a report card in time. So she may just get a 0 and that'll throw off her whole report card, because getting a 0 on the test will be a real kick in the gut. So anyways, half you guys aren't paying attention right now. Do it. I don't care. Talk to nobody. All right, here we go. So we were talking about World War II, and we're going to talk about the end of World War II as best as we can. So the Nazis in Europe, there's 2 theaters of World War II. There's the European theater, where it's Nazi Germany, and Italy, to a lesser extent. Italy does not do much, versus the United States, Great Britain, and Russia, the Soviet Union. And then in the Pacific, you have primarily Japan versus the United States. That's roughly the gist of things. Now, Germany started off the war very well. They invaded and defeated Poland. They invaded and defeated France. They took Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Switzerland and Spain were neutral. So basically they had Austria, Greece, the Balkans, all of that. Basically they had taken all of Europe except for Great Britain. But Adolf Hitler was a crazy person. He was an evil, crazy person. And he had written in his book, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle, he had this idea. And to understand World War II and its kind of terrible, World War II is the worst war because it is, in a sense, a racial war. You look at World War I, there's no like the French or the pure peoples, and there's not really any of that. There's not really any of that in most wars, but in World War II, there's something about race, and it's in most of the places. Japan treats the Koreans and the Chinese as subhumans, and that's, the Japanese saw themselves as superior people. They run terrible experiments on Chinese kids. I mean, it was a age of empire and this idea that the supreme race would emerge victorious. So you have to understand that about Hitler and the Nazi Party to understand how and why they do things. So Hitler, when he was in jail, before he became the leader of Germany, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf. And in it, he says that the German people are the, obviously the best people, and they're at the top. And then he kind of lists the people in descending order. So below Germans, you have English people, right? And English people are almost as good because, remember, it was the Germanic tribes that invaded England. They are Anglo-Saxon people. So Hitler kind of tries to make treaties with England at the beginning, but they're not having any of it. And then below that, you have kind of the French people. Then below that, you have, Spanish people. Italian people, and then below that you have like Slavic people, but then below that you have like people from Asia and Africa, and then below that, the lowest of the low, according to the crazy Nazis, are the Jewish people. Now, racism against Jewish people is called anti-Semitism. You'll hear that word in the future as you grow up. That means hating somebody because they're Jewish. Yeah, Xavier.
Everyone that isn't a Jew is Gentile, right?
Yeah, according to Jewish people, yeah. But so anti-Semitism was something that had existed in Europe for thousands of years. And it's because Europe was Christian that they had a particular distaste for Jewish people in the past. Why do you think medieval age Christians would have disliked Jewish people? Kind of doesn't really make sense if you think about it. But why do you think that Christians of the Middle Ages would have had a beef with Jews? Kezia?
Because they thought that God loved more. So if your parents, you thought your sister was loved more, or your brother was more, you wouldn't like that.
Yeah, that could be something about it. But remember, when Jesus dies, right? The Romans are the ones who do the actual things. But remember, when the Pharisees bring Jesus to Pontius Pilate, and he's kind of deciding, look, you're the king of the Jews, and Jesus is kind of staying quiet, and he says, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. And then he takes him out to the people, and he says, hey, Passover gift, you can either have Jesus or you can have Barabbas. Which one do you want? And they say, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. He's like, all right, well, you can have Barabbas. Well, what do you want me to do with this Jesus guy? Crucify him, right? And then Pontius Pilate does the whole ceremony. I wash my hands of this, right? And so people of the Middle Ages saw Jewish people as the killers of the Lord. Now, that is ridiculous nonsense because Jesus had to die for our sins, right? That's kind of the whole thing. So, if he just lived happily ever after, who knows what would have happened? But also, why else doesn't it make sense to, if you're a Christian, to not like Jewish people? Can you think of any reasons why, Noah?
Because the Jewish people believe in Jesus in different ways.
Yeah, but also, Lucy?
Well, wait, the reason why the Germans hated the Jews after the war?
No. Why? I'm saying the middle-aged Christians disliked Jews, and I'm saying that's ridiculous. If you're a Christian, why should you like Jews?
Oh.
Why?
Because the Bible says to love everybody, love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemies. You have to be filled with love everyone.
That's true. But also, and I'm just going to try and speed things up, Jesus wasn't white. He wasn't Mexican. He wasn't black. He was Jewish, right? Jesus was Jewish. Peter was Jewish. James was Jewish. All of them were Jewish. So if you don't like Jewish people, then you don't like Jesus. Anyways, that's a whole long thing. But anti-Semitism had existed in Europe for millennia. And Hitler brings that in. That's important because Israel did not exist before World War II. So the Jewish people had been scattered throughout the world. Rome had destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jews. So they didn't have their own country. They didn't have their own army. So they were subject to whoever was in charge. And he writes in Mein Kampf that they need to take out the Jewish people and that they need to have Lebensraum, or living room. So, but nobody took him seriously in his book. So even though he had conquered much of Europe, he had this idea of expanding eastward. And so in 1941, Hitler and the Nazis invade the Soviet Union. And that is a big mistake because the Soviet Union is huge. When Germany invades the Soviet Union in September of 1940, it is the biggest invasion of humans ever. There's over 1 million soldiers. There's tens of thousands of tanks, planes, aircraft, everything. And they invade the Soviet Union and they betray Stalin. And the idea is that not only are they going to conquer Western Europe, but they're going to conquer Eastern Europe as well, because the Nazis have the idea that they're going to conquer the whole world. When they invade the Soviet Union, things go well at first. I mean, for them. They do terrible things, obviously. Every time we're talking about the Nazis, terrible things are happening. They conquer all of the Balkans, the Caucasus. They capture the oil. They surround Leningrad, which was St. Petersburg. They get within 25 miles of Moscow. They can actually see the lights of the capital of Moscow. But something happens, sorry. They invade in September. So September, October, November, December. What happens around November or December? Do you think that's bad if you're an invading army, Lucy?
Never mind.
What happens every December, Noah?
Snow.
Snow. It's winter, right? And this isn't like fake winter like LA, right? You could surf in December. The Soviet Union winter is freezing cold. When Hitler wanted to invade the Soviet Union, his generals pleaded with him, no, please don't do this. It's not going to work. Napoleon Bonaparte had invaded Russia back in the 1800s, and he lost 500,000 men. The snow hits, and there's sludge, and there's frozen. They don't have enough. They're freezing cold, and the Soviet forces had been getting beaten up badly. But every time they retreated, they burned everything. They burned their own homes. They burned their own cities. They burned their own crops. Why do you think they did that? Lucy?
Because it's so cold, they can't afford coat. Like, some of them are poor and they can't afford things, so they burn things just to keep warm.
Yeah, but remember, they were leaving, right? So as they're retreating, it's like running out of your house and burning it as you leave.
Oh.
It's called scorched earth policy. Why would they do that, Lucy?
So they don't leave anything behind.
For the Germans, right? So the Germans are advancing. And normally, if you're an army, like, as you conquer, you get to keep whatever you go, right? You take LA, you conquer a Best Buy, you get to take all the stuff as part of like one of the perks. But everywhere they go, they're burning all the stuff. So all the food, ammunition, all of the things that an army needs to be shipped all the way from Germany into Russia. And so the invasion kind of stalls. The roads are too muddy and icy for the trucks to go through. The men are starving, they're hungry. And so in the middle of the Russian winter, the German invasion bogs down. It is in the Soviet Union in 1941 and 42 that the war changes. At the beginning of the war, the Germans were pushing forward. After that, they are pushed back. Now, I have to end the war in Germany right now real quick. At that same time, Germany has now got another enemy in America. So not only did they pick a fight with Russia and are losing now, but instead of just facing England on the west, they're also now facing England and America. And America has a huge economy and now a huge military. And so Germans are fighting a front on two sides, and they know they can't win. And so over the course of the next 2.5 years, the Russians are coming from the east, and the Americans and the English are coming from the west. June 6th, 1944. Does anybody know what important thing happens? If you've ever heard of that movie, Saving Private Ryan, it's called D-Day, and it's when the Americans and the British land on the French soils in Normandy. And so on June 6, 1944, the Americans and the British invade from France. Not only were they invading from France, but the Russians were invading from the east, and the French and the English and the British and the Americans, were invading up through the south through Italy. So Germany's getting squeezed on three sides, and it becomes a race to who can get to Berlin fastest, because the Americans and the Soviet Union did not like each other. In fact, nobody liked the Soviet Union. Can you guess why? We talked about it a little bit, Noah.
Because they got everything.
No. Remember when we talked about like politics and economics? What is the Soviet Union that Americans hated in the past? Kind of still don't like. Starts with a C. Yeah, Lucy?
Communists.
They're communists. And
Oh.
so France doesn't like them. The Germans hate them because they're fascists. England doesn't like them. But if you've ever heard that term, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So England and France and America did not like the Soviet Union, but everybody was fighting against this evil Nazi empire, so they were willing to help each other. But everybody knew when this is over, we're not going to be friends anymore, right? So the English and the Americans are trying to invade as fast as they can to get as much territory as they can. The Soviet Union is trying to do the same thing. But the Soviet Union is pushing faster than the Americans and the English can. So they both invade Germany, but Berlin is in the east. And so it's the Soviet Union that invades Berlin in April of 1945. And instead of surrendering, instead of giving up, the Nazis fight to the end, and they make things even worse. The Holocaust, that I didn't get a chance to talk about as much as I'd like, they are murdering Jewish men, women, and children up until the last day. They knew they were going to lose years in advance, but they keep on doing it. Not only do they not give up, but they start, all of the young soldiers are dead, so they just start forcing old men. They start forcing kids to fight in the army. So you have 15-year-old Hitler Youth, 14 years old. Imagine middle school kids given a gun and a helmet and sent to go out and fight tanks alongside men in their 50s, 60s, right? It's desperate, but it's a losing battle. The Germans their cities are bombed and destroyed. And still, the Nazis keep on fighting. And it's not until April 1945 that in his bunker, Berlin's, like literally there are Soviet troops in the city trying to find Hitler. He's in his underground bunker on the final days. Him, his Department of Ministry, Joseph Goebbels, and his longtime mistress, Eva Braun, are all in this underground bunker. Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler are married. There's a wedding celebration. Then the next day, they take cyanide caplets, which are like poison, and then commit suicide. Their bodies are taken outside and they're burned. And that is the end of the most evil man in history. He knew he couldn't be captured because then they would just like put him on trial and hang him, and it'd be a huge embarrassment for him. So that's the end of the war in Germany. But it's the beginning of the Cold War. So if you had a map up, I wish I had a map, I wish we were in class, the western half of Germany is free. The Americans and the British basically free Germany and help it rebuild. All of the territory that the Soviet Union had taken at the end of World War II, Stalin keeps. So countries like Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, all of these countries in the East are forced to be allies with the Soviet Union, and they stay communist. So up until the 90s, if you lived in if you lived in Budapest in Hungary, you were forced to be communist under Joseph Stalin. And even Germany was split in half, the western half and the eastern half. If we have some time, maybe we'll talk about it. But yeah. But so that was the beginning, the end of World War II in the West is the beginning of the Cold War. Because at the end of World War II, the two strongest powers are the United States and the Soviet Union. And there may have been a World War III, except for the fact that at the end of World War II, there was another invention that stopped all that. On Monday, we're going to talk about it as much as we can. All right. Have a great weekend, guys.